You know that derelict house in your hometown? Yeah, you know the one. The one that people talk about. The one that's been abandoned for as long as anyone can remember. Every town has one. A secret place, rotten through, steeped in mystery and bad omens, half hidden and malign, like a tumour among the mundane sprawl. Ever wondered why houses like that end up abandoned? Has it ever occurred to you to wonder why no new owner ever seems to make progress with renovations? Why such houses just seem destined to decay? Falling quietly into ruin, they go largely unnoticed, with the exception of the local children who, though oddly fascinated, can barely bring themselves to enter, and then only on a dare. And they never stay for long. I can tell you the story of the one in my hometown, because I know it well. It was my grandmother's house, and now it belongs to me. Back when I was a kid, I used to stay with my grandmother during the holidays. Her house was a grand old place, set back from the road on a broad, tree-lined avenue in the old part of town. It was a picturesque place in the summer sunlight, but at night it assumed an unnaturally sombre aspect. At least, that was the lasting impression that place had on me. I treasure fond memories of my gran and her big old house. She was the one who introduced me to photography, presenting me with my first camera on my 10th birthday, an old Nikomat FT with a 50mm lens. That camera went everywhere with me after that. Even when I didn't have any film, I'd have it with me, framing shots, imagining I was Henri Cartier-Bresson. Aside from my lasting passion for photography, the thing that stands out most vividly in my memory, looking back, perhaps only as it stood in stark contrast to all the rest, was the chilling dread I had of venturing upstairs to the bathroom there after dark. Heading upstairs to answer the call of nature wasn't so very bad. It was coming down once I'd finished that somehow always froze my blood. I don't know where the idea came from. I just had this terrible feeling that something was up there, something that waited for me in the dark, something shy and secretive, hidden from sight, that would come after me as soon as I turned my back to descend the stairs. Somehow I knew if I didn't move quickly enough, it would get me. Sometimes, if I took too long or was otherwise preoccupied, I'd catch a glimpse of some stealthy movement in the shadows as I fled the bathroom. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps behind me on the stairs. Once, I swear I felt its breath at the nape of my neck and the tug of sharp talons on my sweater. Just what it might do if it caught me, I couldn't guess. All I knew was, I never wanted to find out. I took to calling it Frazles. I don't recall where the name came from, but it stuck. When she'd hear me thundering down the stairs of an evening, my gran would look up from her book, her watery blue eyes peering at me over the rim of her glasses, and ask with a wry smile if Frazles had been chasing me again. I'd smile nervously and nod, relieved to be back at the big old drawing room, with its coal fire crackling in the grate, and the TV babbling quietly in the corner. It all seemed a bit silly from the comfort of the fireside, with my gran reading in her chair. It was just our little joke. But Frazles was always lurking in the back of my mind, always waiting upstairs for me in my imagination. All that seems like a lifetime ago now. The visits at my grandmother's house petered out after I finished school. I went off to London to study film at college and stayed on after my degree, kicking around working contract jobs and freelancing with one or other of the VFX houses in Soho. When my grandmother died, the old house was left to my dad in her will. He'd retired to Spain for the sake of his health 5 years before, and had neither the energy nor the inclination to bother with the old place. He died not long after his mother, from a sudden heart attack during one of his rare visits home. With the old man's passing, the house was left to me, along with a significant sum of money from his estate. The untimely death of my father had provoked a seismic shift in my perspective. I saw that I'd been wasting my time working in obscurity on the periphery of the film industry in London. If I was going to do something significant, I needed to make some noise, to make my own film. Until now, all my time and energy and all my meager funds had been eaten up by the all-consuming city. Now it seemed I'd been given a new lease of life, my own place where I could live rent-free, and enough ready cash to survive and fund a modest indie project. I drove down from London on the Saturday. I hadn't been home since my father's funeral 6 months before. Originally, I'd intended to set out early, but one thing had led to another, and I ended up leaving just after 3 in the afternoon, on that long drive back to Digglebury. Leaving the rental car in the drive, I paused to frame a photograph of the old place, picturesque as it was in its dilapidation against the backdrop of the October sun setting between russet oaks. Picking my way through the overgrowth toward the house, I mounted the steps to that familiar front door. Imposing as it was, it seemed diminished now, smaller, framed in cobwebs, its paint peeling, the old porch littered with dead leaves that crunched underfoot. Twisting the key in the lock, I was inundated by a wave of nostalgia. Crossing the threshold felt like stepping back in time. The old familiar smell of the place yet lingered on, beneath an overtone of mould and decay, and it transported me back. Suddenly I was a child again, visiting my grandmother for the autumn half-term, and all those long-forgotten childhood memories and feelings came flooding back. Camera in hand, and shooting freely whenever an interesting subject presented itself, I wandered, half bewildered, through the dusty hall and into the old drawing room where, as a boy, I'd spent so many Saturday evenings with my gran. Mildewed dust sheets obscured the furniture, and I found their indistinct contours oddly disturbing. Seen in a failing light, these dim hulks seemed somehow furtive and malign, ghostly shapes that haunted the environs of a time-locked past I'd half forgotten. Overhead, a floorboard creaked, breaking the contemplative silence, the sound drawing my eyes aloft and setting me on a fresh train of thought. Doubtless it was merely the house settling, but I mounted the stair with a thrill of expectation, although exactly what it was I expected to find, I can't say. My old room lay on the first floor, its sash window overlooking the lawn and gardens to the rear of the house, now neglected and overgrown. Venturing inside, I was met by a sorry sight, and it was with a mixture of sentimentality and regret that I reacquainted myself with what was now just a hollow cell, musty and devoid of life, wholly given over to damp and dust and cobwebs and gradual decay. On a whim, I retreated to the bathroom, which lay adjacent to my old room. The place was, if anything, in a worse state than the rest, its stink attesting to some issue with the drains. Deeming it unlikely that I could worsen matters further, I made use of the facilities. As I quit the bathroom, stepping back onto the first floor landing, that floorboard creaked again from somewhere up on the second floor. But I ignored it. Preoccupied as I was with concerns regarding my planned renovation of the house and grounds, I made my way to the stairs. The moment I turned my back, I felt it. That presence. That old-time sense of dread. It crept over me, cold and close, like a physical entity perched on my shoulder, whispering in my ear. "Hurry up," it said. "Don't look back." I was suddenly overwhelmed by an almost irresistible urge to flee, to fly down the stairs and out of the house. It was uncanny, and I fought it, flatly refusing to submit to such childish fears. Fears that could only be inspired by nostalgia and by those deep-seated childhood memories of long ago. I was being foolish, I knew, but somehow I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Stoutly refusing to look back, I nevertheless quickened my pace, that preternatural sense of alarm swelling with every step. At the turn of the stair, I could hold my nerve no longer. Without conscious volition, I found myself looking back, my camera habitually poised for the shot, eyes half reluctant as they tracked up the steps to the landing above. I wish to God I hadn't. I wish I'd held my nerve for just a few seconds longer. I don't know what it was, that thing, but it was big and crooked, and it looked at me with a hunger that will forever haunt my soul. It called my name then, and its voice was at once the most plaintive and the most malign intonation I ever heard. I fled the house and called the police, but they never found anyone. Could it have been a squatter or an escaped lunatic? I couldn't be sure, but in the back of my mind, I knew it was neither. When I came to check my camera's memory card, all the images I'd shot that day were spoilt, save for one. The subject of that image can barely be described, and I feel that, though wholly genuine, my career as a visual effects artist will compel all save the most credulous of observers to deem it nothing more than a cunning hoax. For a time, I was at a loss what to do, though I was certain I could never go back. Should I sell the place, or have it demolished? I considered these options for a time, but in the end I realised I dare not do either. Instead, I would leave it alone to rot, derelict and abandoned, but safe, at least for the time being. I don't see that I have a choice. I couldn't, in all good conscience, sell the place. It would be unethical to foist that house and its malign tenant on some poor, unsuspecting buyer. And something tells me that, if I had the place demolished, Frazles would be set free, loose and on the hunt for a new home. And if that happened, who knows? He might come looking for me.